Computer. Hello, welcome to our on-demand session as part of EDUCAUSE 2020 virtual conference. Today we're going to be talking about change management as part of large-scale implementations at higher ed institutions. My name is John Knox. I am the change manager at Boston University as part of the Student Information System Renewal program. Helping me present today are Mary Lou and Jen.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou O'Donnell-Runlet. I'm Associate Vice President in Enrollment and Student Administration for Student Systems. My role in the SIS renewal effort is as Deputy Sponsor. I represent the functional side of the changes that we're making, and am thrilled to be working with Jen and John.
Hi, my name is Jen King. I've been working at BU for 10 years. Most of my time has been spent in the IS&T project management office, but more recently I took on a role to lead the project organization to replace our legacy student information systems, and we'll be talking a bit more about that during this presentation.
So the first question is, what is change management? And I think for those of us that work in the practice, what is it not? Change management addresses formally a lot of the things that organizations and project teams are already doing on a project to ensure ultimately that users adopt the solution. I think oftentimes people hear change management and think of program change management or more technical focus, but this is talking much more about the training, the communication, the advocating for the people who are actually using the system. That being said, there are limits to a change manager's reach. And I think that oftentimes you come in and people say, well, this project is not going to benefit this group. It's going to give them a lot more work. They're going to get a lot more difficult questions, and they're going to spend a lot more time tied up in administrative tasks. Can you make that good for them? And I say, no, that's not exactly change management. What you're looking for is more of a Svengali or a hypnotist. And there are limits. I think that advocating for the user to prevent that is somewhat change management, but really change management is much more about checking boxes and making sure people have a voice and that they are catered to. For specifics on the SIS program and how we're going to use change management, Jen's going to lead us through the next phase.
So the SIS, Student Information System, which we will probably all refer to as SIS throughout this presentation, renewal program was established back in 2017 after an internal risk assessment really demonstrated things that we already knew. We have an aging legacy student information system at Boston University. It's on a mainframe platform, and it needs to be replaced. This has been a long journey for folks at Boston University, and if you're familiar with the SIS marketplace at all, it's very challenging. There's not a one solution that's going to fit all the needs that you have. So we've been navigating that journey as we are in this renewal program. But we need a stable and supportable program to help support the strategic initiatives that Boston University wants to offer. There's things that are thrown our way that we might not have expected, such as COVID-19. We want to be able to support interdisciplinary study in a more agile framework. And one example we wanted to share is that our university received a very generous donation a few years back that ended up renaming our business school. That project alone, to work that through our legacy system, took over 18 months and cost over $700,000. So we need to be more agile, and Mary Lou's going to walk us through some more specific examples related to SIS.
So when one thinks about a student information system, especially at a large institution like BU, you think about roads and bridges. It is what facilitates the academic offerings at the university. The system that we had, as Jen and John have said, was built in the 80s. At the time, and this slide illustrates some of the issues with it. At the time, universities were set up for fall and spring. Summer programs were happening, but were relatively small and not a feature at the university. Today, as we all know, not only are summer programs a thing, but also half semesters, winter sessions, all sorts of calendar challenges that our mainframe just can't accommodate. We don't do a very good job through the mainframe of engaging our students. Mobile apps and things like that are hard to build and difficult to maintain. We are constantly faced with meeting strategic challenges to make sure that students can engage in new programs as they come up. And new programs, as Jen said, are increasingly interdisciplinary. So for all of these reasons, we wanted something modern that could support the academic mission of the university. But just like roads and bridges, it's hard to carve out the time and enthusiasm around taking something that was so customized and able to do everything except for the new stuff and convince people that it's time to change it. But that's where we are today. And John's going to walk us through some of the ways we think about change management in this environment.
Yeah, so as Mary Lou pointed out, there are some unique challenges to both the system that we're transitioning away from and getting people used to potentially having a little less control of everything. And so there are a number of common, not unique, change management tools that we can take advantage of, but there are a few tenets and really just ways of thinking about change management that I think it's important we, and I as a change manager, I'm really going to be working towards applying to this specific project. All of these have associated tools along with them, but it's much more of a way of thinking and a baseline around how you do change management to make it be effective. And while these tenets are for SIS and are going to be what we use, I think a lot of this stuff should be reused and be thought about no matter what project you're implementing. So Mary Lou, we're going to bring it back to you for the first one, being practical.
So we needed a way, a simple way to really highlight the impact of the changes that we were making as we were making them. Something that would really highlight the difference between before and after in terms of changes that we made, whether it's implementing Salesforce for our admissions staff or looking at bigger components of the system and changes in business process that would accompany the changes in the actual technical system. So we developed, we utilized a Lean Six Sigma tool, start, stop, and continue, in which we could bring a group of people together and say, think about the process that was before the change and think about where you are now. Or if we hadn't implemented yet, we could forecast and say, given what you know about the implementation, what is this going to be like? What will you start doing that you haven't done before? What will you stop doing that you've always done but don't have to anymore? And what won't change? What will you continue? And this can be something that can be revisited before and then come back afterwards and sort of accumulate as you move through the program so that people can quickly connect to their own individual experience, but also make it more broad to think about what a school or an entity or an office starts, stops, and continues. And then for more practical manifestation, Jen's going to talk about metrics and how they connect.
Thanks, Mary Lou. So we try to measure and quantify wherever possible. We leverage techniques as regards to tracking meeting attendance, survey participation, really trying to get numbers to help us drive next steps around change management strategies, around training and communications moving forward. So I was going to share a couple examples that that we've leveraged in this sense. For a program announcement, we had taken two paths last year. One is a large message was sent out through the provost's account and directly from the provost. And then we also sent a message out from our project sponsors. And one thing we were able to track is website traffic. And we ended up getting more website traffic to our project website from the message that was sent directly from the project sponsors. So that's a data point that we can leverage to figure out next steps in our communication strategy. Another example happened this week. We're in the midst of some system demonstrations, and we have a large population of folks that are participating in those, in which we want to get their feedback. We used a Qualtrics survey that was sent through email. 8 people responded. We switched gears and did a Zoom survey within the tool at the end of the presentation, and we got 52 responses. So again, data points and that can be leveraged to adjust how we will be communicating with the population so that you can make informed decisions.
Yeah, Jen, I think that speaking from a change manager perspective, a sort of separate benefit of tracking these success with metrics outside of that you are basing your decisions for future communications meeting strategies on evidence is that it's much more compelling with a lot of audiences to say this percentage versus this percentage, and much more easier for comparison purposes. And then very often in tech implementation, you're dealing with people who are used to dealing in numbers, and that it's less saying, oh, we're going to send this email because it could make people feel this way. And I've found that people tend to reject that. They say, you know, I've found the other way. And so here you have hard numbers that can really help sort of sell your methodology and really reinforce what you're doing with that audience.
Right, and it might not be based off of anecdotal feedback that one person might have. You really can bring some concrete evidence to the table.
Yeah.
So I think, John, you're going to walk us through how to best tailor some interactions with our stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that every time a new project starts and you ask people, what's the best way to communicate? And they say, oh, well, no one reads emails. We'll say, we'll have a meeting. And they say, oh, well, no one attends meetings. And we'll say, oh, okay, well, we'll do a mass chat function. They'll say, oh, no, that's too annoying. It'll bother people. And everyone does have their own opinions. And I think this ties very closely into the metrics conversation that Jen just talked about, of what communications work and which don't. And so I think it's also instructive because it's different channels, different methods for everyone. And so where possible, really dig into that and say, these groups probably won't have metrics like we will, but say, how does your team get their information? You know, is it in a weekly staff meeting with their supervisors, managers? Is it a monthly newsletter that you send out that everyone reads? And find out how each organization operates from a communications perspective. A lot of organizations have their own communications groups, or they have certain people that have sort of shouldered the burden of getting the word out for different activities. They may have a coffee break room with a bulletin board that every single person in the organization walks by. And so finding out how to best interact with them or get your message across is really important for filling in the gaps that are common in traditional communication plans. I think that I've been talking a lot about the communication between organizations, one to another. I think that at a place like BU, which has a lot of schools with developed cultures, I think a lot of universities have it, you'll find more of these differences. I know some groups are almost allergic to PowerPoint, and so they'll want you to come into a meeting and just draw something out on the board with them. So finding out that stuff. Certainly in higher ed, you are going to have different messaging to faculty that you would staff, and students versus faculty, or students versus staff. So finding out where to use social media, who does read emails. And again, that's why that tracking is so important. But understanding that there is going to be a difference, and that the more you're aware of it, like I said, the less gaps that you're likely to run into. So I think we'll move on to Jen, who's going to talk through the expectations part.
Yeah, and this is a challenge. I want to be upfront in that. Throughout my career as a project manager, putting together project requests or project charters and quantifying how, at the end of the project, how are we going to determine if it's successful or not. So our message is to continue to advocate for this wherever possible, because when expectations are codified in a way that you can refer back to them throughout the life of the project, it really it's treated as a kind of a North Star where you can always go back to it. If you're reaching a challenging part of a project during any of the phases, you can go back to say, well, what are our outcomes that are going to lead us to success? And this is, like I mentioned, challenging from a project sponsor perspective. Some people don't want to commit to specific numbers for compliance or specific indicators at the end, but it is something that definitely should be thought about, if not put into formal project documentation, at least referenced throughout the project so that you can always go back. Because many times I've had this happen where you end a project, the team thinks it's successful, but there's a particular stakeholder that did not, and that could have been avoided if expectations were made clear earlier on and throughout the project. All right, I think Mary Lou's going to talk to us about change fatigue.
This year more than any other, and anyone who especially works in higher ed, and the changes and the challenges that COVID brought to us, they're just by the way we do our jobs, the way we think about things was all changed to the entire university, and people are exhausted. And we have come along now and said, okay, now we're going to change our student information system. So I think, first of all, recognizing that people are shell-shocked and exhausted as we walk into this, made a couple of things clear to us. One, sponsor commitment and messaging was even more important than it is normally, which is always a huge part of success. But also making sure that when we ask people to come to the table, we are clear about how we're going to use their time, and that we use it well, and that we don't have a lot of exploratory discussion meetings. We really are clear about the agendas, and we're bringing people when we need them for a set purpose and then letting them go. I also think we found the leverage in the sense that we're all on Zoom, so it eliminated our constraints of space, at least, and we were able to invite many more people to the demos than we normally would have if we were on campus and constrained by space. So that will help with change management, because we were able to bring people along and let them know what was happening in larger volume than we would have otherwise. And then I think just what we found and what we're finding is that people are enjoying the change of subject, that we can come together and talk about something that isn't related to COVID is actually a relief, and something that people are a little more enthusiastic about than they may have been otherwise. So I believe, John, you're taking it from here.
Thanks, Mary Lou. So the last tenet is sponsorship. And Mary Lou talked about how important sponsorship is during this time, and certainly reinforcing priorities for the program. But I think that this is sort of a culmination of a lot of the tenets, because it certainly has to do with expectations, certainly has to do with reinforcing, busting through change fatigue, has a lot to do with managing up, convincing people, and ultimately communication plans. I think a big aspect of this is also contingency planning. A lot of sponsors on a lot of projects are wonderful and really feel the passion for implementing a tool and understanding how this can benefit their school, their department, and really be excited about bringing efficiency, bringing new bells and whistles to everyone. But sometimes this is another role that a sponsor has among a million other things. and they're dealing with their own change fatigue and their own pack schedules. And so understanding what to do if a sponsor is really not being active, and how you can correct it. And oftentimes it can be as easy as pointing out that you need more help than you're getting, but sometimes you don't have that kind of control. And certainly as a change manager, you don't always have that kind of control, where you just need to say, this is the current situation. And if the sponsor is, you are finding inconsistent messaging across departments, that you are not given prioritization to show up in other meetings, to bring, trumpet accomplishments and get answers from people, you can sort of have to diagnose and say, maybe we have a sponsorship problem. Like, are we getting tangible commitment from leadership? And a big part of that is, what tangible commitments can you make? I mean, if you say, yeah, I'll come to a meeting once a month and, rubber stamp something, that's helpful, but it's not active. And so this is a little extreme, but saying, okay, if your people are helping us on the project, that needs to be part of their performance review, even if they're just a change agent. And ultimately, as a sponsor, should be part of your performance review. But really bringing sponsors on board and managing them throughout is like, it's the secret sauce in a lot of organizations, but I think in higher ed, it's especially important. And that if you don't have that kind of sponsorship, you're going to have to plan around it and double up some efforts on communication, tracking, expectations, everything. So all that being said, if you stick to the tenets, I think that you will see there are a lot of benefits that change management can bring a project. And really, change management, and my real take-home point is, this is already happening. For every project, you're communicating, you're training, you are managing stakeholders, you are trying to promote adoption. You just might not be doing it with intent. You might not be doing it based on metrics. You might not be doing it using the tools. You just might be throwing it out there and hoping it sticks. And you don't have to be. There's a lot of tools and a lot of methodologies that are very helpful. And ultimately, no matter which ones you decide to use, I say do it with intent. I don't know if Mary Lou, you have some comments.
I would just say my take-home message would be, as John said, communicate, 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 and don't shy away from the difficult conversations. Make sure you're managing expectations throughout the life cycle of the project. And if the scope is changing, or you have to tell someone that you can't meet a particular requirement, have the conversation and put it out there, and don't try to sugarcoat it or not be upfront, because it will definitely come back to bite you.
Yeah, and I can echo both messages as well with what change management really means for me through my role as a project manager and director is transparency and communicating where we need to, when we need to build trust with the team, trust with our sponsors and stakeholders, and ultimately trust with the community of end users for the new system that you're implementing. Because without that, you won't be moving forward successfully.
So that's all we have. Hope it was instructive for everyone. Hope it was a breezy 23 minutes, but we're very happy to continue the conversation. So please feel free to ask any change management questions, CIS questions, BU questions. Our emails are right here. And so you probably also will be able to get in touch with us through the EDUCAUSE site. But I really appreciate you clicking on us, and I hope you get a lot out of the conference. So thank you.